What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Valley coming at you with my one, my only, my certified fantabulous co-host of the Hardwood Knocks podcast, Mr. Grant Hughes. We're back. Hashtag WJAQ. We're just asking questions. We cannot be held responsible for what type of discussions or answers they lead to. The question of the day. Can the NBA fix tanking? Is tanking its biggest problem? Is tanking even a problem? I think before we get into the potential solutions that are floating around out there, because the competition committee recently met and tried to hash this out. That's the trigger for it. Excuse me. Grant, why is tanking considered such a big issue in the NBA, where a lot of these other leagues are still, let's just use the NFL as an example, the worst teams, there is no lottery. Like the worst teams just automatically, they get the best picks.
Yeah, I mean, this is all we've hit on some aspect of everything we're going to hit here as a preamble, but like the core issue is it seems fairly well established that the best way to build a contending roster is to draft a superstar around whom you center your whole operation, and you win championships that way. It's easier to do it that way than trading for that player. It's certainly easier to do it that way than signing that player in free agency. Like, just look around the league. I mean, there are exceptions to every rule, but your Tim Duncans, your Steph Currys, your Jason Tatums, your Nikola Jokic's, like, drafted, right? Not all with super high picks, which is relevant, but that's just that's the way to do it, I think, if you're trying to have the most effective strategy. So if the reason you pick high in a draft is because you had a bad record, then teams are going to at least look at the upside of having a bad record. That's the short answer, right? Like, it's just, there's an incentive to losing. And so some teams that are not capable of winning at the highest level decide rather than be in the middle. And we support this a lot of the time, by the way. They try to win the race to the bottom because they want their Wembanyama, Curry, Jokic, whoever. They want that guy. The reason it's a really big discussion, unless you have something to add to the why is it an issue, is its uniqueness too, because the NFL doesn't have a tanking problem. Major League Baseball does not have a tanking problem. International soccer really does not have a tanking problem because you get relegated. You get sent to a lower league and make less money if you are on a team that quote unquote tanks. Like, so I think the reason it's a discussion is because this isn't this is an NBA issue, really, among the major sports, both American and internationally. It's like, we don't talk about this for other sports. And so that's why it's so interesting, is because it speaks to like the different incentive sets that exist in the NBA that don't really exist in a lot of other sports. So I don't know. Do you have a different take on it? Like it seems pretty clear to me why tanking is an issue. Just because there's pluses to losing.
I am fascinated by it, by the focus on it, though, when it comes to the NBA, because some of the leagues would it be better? Like, wouldn't it be worse if the worst teams just got the picks? I feel like it kind of comes back to, why is the NBA season so long? And they're trying to figure out a way, this is fair, is if you're not going to shorten the season. Because in theory, if you shorten the season, it curbs tanking, but they're never going to shorten the season. But I do agree with the sentiment of March and April basketball in the NBA is just not it. I learn the least amount basically about the league and its teams that enter during that span. You could probably even say post All-Star break, maybe. And we're also at a point to where you say, never mind the fines from teams. Utah got fined a bunch last year. We've seen Philly get fined with certain injury reporting. But you've also just sort of reached a point where teams that play well, or breakout players, you're thinking, well, does that really count? Like, what was the joke that we used to have about Jalen Green? Like, he's the post All-Star Brit, so he's just like ephemeral, the best version of himself. And to what you already said, the fact that one player can make such a difference, so you are, even if you remove the lottery from the equation, you're just incentive, like one, even more than a QB in the NFL, just one person makes all the difference. In hockey, you're playing these shorter stints on the ice. It's like you're not going to rack up as many consecutive minutes to where you can impact a game. What I am hesitant, before we get into like some of the solutions that were thrown out there, and we can pick and choose which ones we want to talk about, because the competition committee came up with some, we have our own, we culled from others. I really think that we need to remember that there's a reason why like some teams are just bad. And I sometimes feel like badness gets conflated with tanking, or their rebuilding gets conflated with tanking. The Wizards, as an example, they can pull shenanigans at the end of the season, but I don't know that any one player they remove from their lineup is going to impact the results as much as you deal with certain other teams. And like that's where I kind of struggle with it. And the other thing that I will say, I find this more criminal than tanking, is the existence of the Bulls or the Kings, as an example, that are just aiming to be like, I guess they're trying through and through, so it matters, but they're not actively trying to contend either. Is there integrity in doing what Chicago specifically does? Not really.
Well, that's what makes it interesting, and that's what this is a unique NBA issue. I feel like, because we give the Kings and Bulls a really hard time because, well, I mean, for a lot of reasons, but one of them is they won't just rip the Band-Aid off, right? And to me, like, if you really do step back, that is a weird thing. Like, from our side, like, we're annoyed by them or think they're being dumb because they're
Mhm.
trying to win more games than we think is smart. And like that's a weird system. Like, it's a competitive sport. The object is to win, but we think they should do things so that they lose on purpose. Now, it's not just lose on purpose. It's like, have a plan. Like, the goal of losing now is to win later, right? Like, it's not totally divorced from like the object of the sport, but like, it always strikes me as strange that it's like the correct decision, and when teams don't make it, we give them shit about it, is to try to be bad. Right? Like
Mhm.
that's a problem. That's like a structural issue to me. And other sports just don't deal with it and nearly don't have it in anything close to the same way.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, but also I would ask you though, is like, what's more honorable if you're tanking to try and get a player that will allow you to contend for titles, or to actively like there's no way the Bulls can have looked at themselves at any point since the Derrick Rose era and
Mhm.
said we are actually a contender.
Yeah.
Is that like that sort of leans towards they're just trying to keep the lights on, but to where we want to
Yeah.
make as much money. We want that play-in gate revenue. We want the first round playoff, the 3 or 4 games that we might get revenue, 2 or 3 games, depending on how long the series lasts.
So it's kind of like you said, honorable. It's almost like, I mean, there is some honor in trying to win the game that night, basically, regardless. But it's like they're doing it unambitiously because they're just hanging out in the middle
I,
for gate
I,
revenue or whatever. They're not going all the way to the bottom or like making win now trades to
and
be a top 4 seed today.
and I'm not trying to say I'm a tanker sympathizer. It's just
Yeah.
that there are certain, like, the what the Bulls do specifically, just to keep coming back to them, that really grinds my gears
Hmm.
more than actual tanking does, because at least it feels like tanking is more purposeful. Now, I don't think it should be happening. I think it's bad for the product. It's like, but I'm just I feel between that and then conflating it with just rebuilding teams, that how do you get good? You do have to rebuild at some point, and you're not going to be good for a while. Sometimes conflating those teams, if it like that sort of peeves me a little bit too, because it's okay. So let's use the Wizards as an example. What if they were chock full of veterans beyond CJ McCollum and Chris Middleton? They should play all those guys because it gives them a better chance of winning games, even though it comes at the expense of the development of the younger guys who at some point do need to play and get reps.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, this is why it's hard to be, you can be like annoyed with the state that the game gets to in March and April and stuff, and I am too. But it's almost like you gotta acknowledge that some, like, teams are just like, here's the rules of the game, and they're trying to strategize in a way that gives them the best outcome, and that's losing sometimes. So it's like, I'm never like mad at the team in particular, because it's like, yeah, I get it. Like, you've probably correctly assessed like what your incentives are, and you're just doing the thing that gets you closer to them. Um, but it is like, well, Emily, let me kind of related to that. Don't you think that the worst type of tanking is not? I think that the type of tanking that the league is very concerned about is like a process Sixers thing. That's like, there's no end in sight to this. We're just going to do this until we do hit the lottery. figuratively and metaphorically, or and literally. Um, but to me, the otherwise pretty competitive team that, like, this is the play-in was introduced to curb some of this, but that is like, nope, we don't want the playoffs. We would prefer to lose so we get a lottery pick. Like those middle of the road tankers that just shut it off at the, they got
Yeah.
36 wins and they just totally, like, put everything away for the last 15 games or even longer. Like that's like, and what we always keep saying Utah should do, or has to do because they start too hot. Like that feels like an almost bigger problem, because then it's not just a bad team that's always going to be bad, staying bad. It's a team that, like, I don't know, shouldn't you want to make the playoffs? Like that to me is what's the craziest version of it.
Well, I think, and so if we get into solutions, what you kind of hit on, and this is, so let's go through the ones that the competition committee had talked about most recently. This was limit the pick protections on trades to top 4 or post lottery. This way you're not having what you just mapped out with the Jazz last year and maybe this season, because they owe that protected pick to the Thunder. What the Sixers did last year to keep that was top 6 protected, right? And it ends up getting them BJ Edgecombe. What the Dallas Mavericks did in the year that they ended up trading and getting Derek Lively, where they just punted on getting into the play-in altogether. This, I don't know how you feel about this solution. Obviously, that's why we're having this. I'm okay with this. It would probably simplify trades a little bit. I don't know, what do you think it would maybe hurt the level of activity in trades?
That is the related question, is like, is whatever you do, there's going to be unintended consequences, whatever the league decides to do. But I think one that it should be very concerned about is curbing like transactional activity. So if you think that limiting pick protections in this way will reduce the number of trades we see, then it's like, I don't know, because the NBA thrives on like trade speculation, and that's just like what everybody pays attention to. I'm kind of the mind that it wouldn't curtail trading. I think there's a good argument to be made that it would simplify it. It's just like, because you're not, I'm trying to think of an example of, well, you don't hear about it, but because they're closed door discussions, but like, I don't know, the Hawks Pelicans pick isn't a good trade, isn't a good example, but like teams that haggle over pick protections, maybe that makes it so some deals don't happen. And maybe now if like there's kind of 2 that you can put on a pick and that's it, and it simplifies things. So I don't know what would happen. I'm not super convinced that it would hurt or like decrease trade activity, which is like a big concern.
No, I don't think it would. I guess if I had a concern or a point is, I don't, in any given year, how many teams are doing something to keep a pick that's protected outside the top 4? And if you're the Sixers, let's just say last year's pick was top 4 protected instead of top 6.
Yeah.
Do you think they go about their post All-Star slide any differently? Because we knew they couldn't get the bot, they weren't been able to be 4th in the lottery.
Right.
We knew that by that point, but you would still have a statistical chance of jumping into the top 4, which is, by the way, what they ultimately did.
Yeah. No, that's a good question. I think the examples this year are Utah and Washington both have top 8 protected picks, top 8 protected 2026 picks, and so like Washington, not an issue. They're gonna have. Well,
they're winning some games as we record this.
Well, okay, less of an issue than for Utah, whose pick famously is going to go to the Thunder if they don't hold on. I mean, we were talking about the Clippers earlier this year too, when they were really down in the dumps, conveying a pick.
Here's a thought, just a spin off based off this idea. What if you just weren't allowed to trade any sort of protected picks or picks at all to the Thunder without curtail tanking at all?
Yeah. I think that's one the league might need to look at. But like, so I'm just trying to think. So if you had top 4, so if these top 8s weren't there, so the Jazz and Wizards are either top 4 or top 14 protected on the picks they have outgoing.
Those are teams that wouldn't. What would it change? Those are still teams that would want a top 4. But like, neither, you could say maybe Ace Bailey and Utah. Or do they look at it as, okay, we have Ace, Keontae George, and Larry Marketing? If that pick was top 4 protected instead of top 8, I don't think it would change the trajectory of how this season will play out for them at all. If anything, I would argue that they would be more likely still to kind of if they do throw in the towel, Austin Ainge too, has said that they won't do anything like that. I think it would make it more likely that they're more aggressive about being bad. That's just, I don't know that
So
that makes the problem worse. I just don't know if it fixes this midseason issue entirely.
So do you think that the examples that we went through of like the Sixers getting with the Edgecombe pick, or the Lively pick, or I guess Case and Wallace that became Derek Lively for Dallas a couple
So
years
no, that
ago?
it would weed out the Mavs one for sure because
So
they had.
yes, but are you saying then that, or do you think that those incidents are few enough and far enough between that like the limiting pick protections is not, it's like solving a problem that actually doesn't come up as much as we think?
I
Is
think
that kind of the argument?
right. It's a step above trying to solve a problem you don't have because it is a problem. I just don't know if it's a huge problem because if anything, I think what it does is shift the behavior of teams earlier into the schedule slash season, maybe if the picks are top 4 protected.
Okay, yeah, right. Because you got to, if you're trying to land in there, you've got to from day one, you've got to be built to lose, right? If you're trying to get in the top four, where like top
Yeah.
eight is if I don't know. I think I think the concern would be that top 14 section. You might just have teams that are even better if it's okay. This pick's top 14 protected. That's when isn't that when you would have the worst issue of like, well, do we want to make the play in or do we want to just call it? Right? Is that because wherever
When's the
you
last
move the
time you saw teams going all out to keep the number 14 pick,
right,
though?
right. Well,
There's a
to like
catch.
maybe move up. But that's the thing. It's a lottery pick. Like
That's
right.
fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah,
I
but
think
to your point, teams are always going to play the math. And the math in this instance would be you have a 0.1% chance at getting the number 1 pick, or you have a 0% chance of getting it. And teams will pick a lot of the
right
times the
because
former.
Cooper Flag shouldn't be in Dallas. To a much lesser extent, Zach Risache should not be in
Which
Atlanta. Like those teams jumped.
the other thing, by the way, when you talk about, I think this was the intended consequence, but like the current lottery climate is doing what it intended because look at who has won. Look at what happened over the past 2 years, or look at
Yeah,
what's happened since it's
yeah.
been implemented.
I do think I don't know what the fallout would be. I would just be I don't hate this idea. I want to say like of the options, I think this is actually pretty good. Not to say that there aren't other options we haven't discussed yet or that will come to light
Does
eventually, but like what I would be most worried about is I would not want to do anything that incentivized a team that's like higher up the competitive hierarchy to lose. Like I don't who cares about the like the out and out like true tankers, right? The very worst teams in the league, like I get it. But I don't want like the taint of that like climbing the competitive ladder to where it's a potential playoff team or even a play. Like the more you can limit those types of tanking behaviors, I think that's like the mark of a good change. I don't know what this would do in that respect.
it feels more innocuous to maybe slightly net positive. So why not just
Yeah,
implement
I,
it?
I agree. I agree. So what's a less preferable option on the table?
This was
here?
another one the competition committee talked about, which was limiting the like teams can't get a top 4 pick in consecutive years. And I think that's just a dumpster fire of an idea because what is Nate Duncan calls it the Risache rule. Sometimes like what if the draft class just isn't good? And also what I actually think would happen is now you just have these longer windows of rebuilding or tanking to where teams are, well, we've got this 5-year time horizon in which we'll have 3 bites at the apple of getting a top 4 pick. And that's how they'll operate.
Well, I think that's a problem. I think again, because I'm hung up on this, like let's say you're not one of the 4 worst teams. You're somewhere above that, maybe not too far above it, but you're looking at the list and like, oh, 3 of those teams picked in the top 4 last year. So I know that they won't get the pick. So
Yep.
I'm the 8th, 9th, 10th worst team, but I got a great shot now of getting into that top 4 because these other teams are ineligible. Like, so now you're just like, this is like completely antithetical, I think, to what you want. What it does do is make it so you don't feel like some team that's poorly run just keeps getting cracks at like a transformative player and doesn't deserve it.
It brings you lottery parity, I guess, is what it does. Just like
I just don't want the 9th worst team thinking like, well, it's actually a pretty good decision for us to lose every game we can now because these other 3 teams or 2 or 4, whatever it is, like those slots aren't really spoken for. We might be able to get into. I just like you can't have
This
that.
I don't think this has a puncher's chance of happening. Brian Windhorst pointed this out. You need 23 of the league's owners to approve any of these changes. I can't think that you're going to get 23 of 30 votes on this.
I wouldn't think so. I certainly this appeal. Well, we got another suggested one that I also really don't like. That one just seems like I don't understand the benefit at all.
How many games so it's lock in for Grant's reacting without even telling anyone what it is.
No, I was talking about the previous one.
Oh, sorry. The next one is lock in draft lottery odds by March 1st. How do you feel about that one?
I just think it moves the tanking starting gun a little bit. And I don't know that it solves a problem. It makes the season confusing. It would theoretically incentivize teams to win as much as they could at the end of the season, which we want to happen. We don't like it that several decent teams and the very bad ones aren't trying. So I don't know that this gets you the results you want, other than like it makes some of these still meaningless games slightly more meaningful. Like, I don't know. What's your take on it? I don't see
how many games are played between March 1st and April 12th, whenever the NBA season is? You're talking about less than a quarter of the team season, basically. So I don't know how that's going to materially change behavior. Now, this is a hybrid, this next one, of a couple ideas, and I actually really like it. So don't let that impact your views, but you're supposed to love it. Losses count towards your lottery odds before the trade deadline. After the trade deadline, wins help your lottery odds.
So in theory, then let's talk it out. So if you are, let's say, okay, so the losses count pre-deadline. So there's sort of a pseudo standings lock here, but not totally, because you can then improve your odds by winning games after.
Yeah.
So what's that look like? Like, give me a team and like map out its season for me with what their goals are.
Now, I guess what you could argue is that, could you just say, as the Wizards, we're terrible now, we're going to go make a trade at the deadline to try and get better so that we can rack up wins and improve our, like, how married are you to doing that? I feel like that could hamper it, but I do think you would, if it's losses before and wins after, I think what it would do is weed out a lot of the middle of the pack stuff that we kind of see, to where teams are just, because now you get to a point where even if you're so bad at the beginning, you would have to make that midseason move or have this midseason breakout to ensure that you have these top lottery odds. The Wizards, as an example, they could be first in the lottery order right now. Mm-hmm. They could then be dead last or something, like after February 8th. Well, this year's the 5th. After February 5th, that's a not insignificant chunk of the season. That's like 30 games, maybe a little bit more than that.
Well, okay. I want to do an example and then ask you a question. Hopefully I'll remember the question. Probably not. So take Utah this year. They have that top 8 protected pick they would like to hold on to. So then the losses they accumulate sets them wherever they are before the deadline. And then the best way for them to keep their pick is to win as much as possible after the trade deadline under this setup.
And think about what that does for just certain playoff seeding races, where if you don't get to just count Utah, Washington, Brooklyn as this March 15th victory, and you're locked in a battles of, like, if it's the Nuggets trying to like claw their way back into the top 6 after the Jokic injury.
So this rests on the supposition that the players, so this organizationally, this aligns your incentives, because it's like, you're not going to rest guys. You're not going to do the nights off, the back spasms stuff. You're going to play your players as a coaching staff in an organization because you want that high pick. What about the players then? Because this is an argument that gets thrown out there sometimes of like, well, so the players here want the team to be able to pick someone that will play over them, and that's why they're playing hard. You know what I mean? Like, that argument comes up a lot of like, well, the players on the team don't necessarily want a number 1 overall pick because like that guy's taking somebody's job.
Now, I understand that in the context of if it was this tournament specifically designed at allocating draft picks, but you're also, if you're a veteran or whether you're on your rookie scale, you're still playing for your next contract then, whether it's with that team or another? And
Yeah.
which is going to be more valuable? You helping a team win and then they draft your replacement and they like you'll still hopefully be able to find other. But what would be can you give me an example of a player that would be burned by that wouldn't have been burned in the first place by a team
Uh,
going about it that way?
I don't know. Like, well, why isn't like someone say Ace Bailey? Because I'm stuck on Utah or something. Like, why does Ace Bailey want AJ DeBonta to be on the team with him? Like, is he concerned?
So I guess if you're thinking that Ace Bailey is so insecure about his position within the Jazz
Well, yeah.
organization.
I'm just yeah, you're right. I can't get inside Ace Bailey's head. He seems like a cool dude, but like, right, okay. That's interesting. I wonder if you could tweak it and like, because the money of the in season tournament seems to matter to like the lower end of the roster, and the by extension, like the highly paid players like care about it because they want like their minimum salary buddies to like get paid. What if you could
Mhm.
incentivize wins after the All-Star break with like additional I don't know how you would ever do this because contracts are guaranteed at finite numbers, but like if you could make the money aspect of it, if you could introduce the money aspect, I
So
don't
are you
know.
making you're basically making a like in-season tournament post All-Star break
Yeah,
pool of
I don't know
money.
how it gets there. I'm just thinking that this is a good. I think this is. I like this idea, but I
And
just
also, by the
wonder.
way, I know I mentioned this is kind of tongue in cheek, but it does add the element of what if one of these bad teams just goes out and decide like because think about it from a rebuilding perspective. Let's use the Jazz as an example. Let's just say they are where they are in the lottery when the trade deadline rolls around. If they went out and made like a consolidation trade to get a better player who could then also
Mhm.
help them get a better pick, and now you're really, in theory, shrinking the rebuilding timeline because you've gotten better so that you could get another better player. That
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know how many teams would do that, but it would add just sort of another layer of decision making to how you go about structuring your team longer term.
That idea that's really interesting because like you're sort of getting it both ways, right? Like you're getting better now, but that actually facilitates you getting better over a longer timeline. I think that gets really like talk about layers of complication. Like when you're a team, I guess we'll just stick with Utah. Like, would you trade future first round picks like to you know what I mean? Like
I don't
because
think you would, but like you have these bottom of the barrel firsts that are going to convey. Like you look at these teams that are really good. Is it? And you decided, hey, we can get LaMelo Ball for 2 or 3. It's
well,
like, why
not
not?
only that, but if you are trading for an upgrade now, because it also gets you, assuming you obviously it goes without saying you have to control the pick the following year, like and upgrading now also gives you this better shot at like oh man like someone who could theoretically you pick them very high in the draft could help sooner, you might be more willing to kick, down the road picks into a deal because you're like, we're kind of taking two steps towards short term improvement with this win now trade and the fact that it gets us a better first rounder immediately. Oh, my 2028, like who knows by then, like we'll be good. That'll be a late. That's interesting. You could really in a good way, complicate the trade like decision making process, I think.
Now you mentioned the logistical purposes of figuring out how do you like tracking the lottery order would probably get all sorts of confusing,
Yeah.
but what is the other like they figure out they don't have teams scheduling games and they figure that out in the middle of the year. So I want to ask you what it would be. Is there any functional downside to the way that the league operates? Like what would be the potential downside to something like that? So I
To
struggled to find one, but I might just be so locked into it being a good idea.
the downside to the losses pre-trade and then wins after
Wins
the trade
after.
deadline. Like, what are the
I think
unintended consequences, you mean? Or like what
like
I'm
well, I guess would the unintended consequences be, do you worry about a team getting too good that's in the like you just keep going with
oh,
Utah to where it's Utah's not bad right
yeah.
now. Like they're not the worst team in the league. And now all of a sudden, if they're able to win, like because if you look at a team that's actively rebuilding, even if the Washington Wizards decide we're gonna rosters as is, no other supplementary moves, Washington can play. Everyone could be healthy. They could play what they think is their best unit. They're probably right now, at least, going to win fewer games than a
I
team like the
see.
Utah Jazz. And so, are you inadvertently kneecapping them? I don't know, but
Well, you're right, because you would then here's another one, like, you would be incentivized as a bad team to come out of the gates. This is a terrible fan experience situation too. You want to lose every single game you can lose from October 20th or whatever until the
2 and
deadline.
49.
You
That's the
you want to
goal.
start
Yeah.
so bad. Like that would not be great from an entertainment perspective. And just like every team at the beginning of the year, its fans are like, hey, you know what? Don't count us out. Or like for the most part, like that optimism, that would just go away. If you're a Wizards fan and you know we gotta lose for 4 months, like or 3.5 months before the wins count, that's rough. And then I think that is you're right. Like it doesn't matter how hard certain teams try to win after the fact or after the break, like they just won't be able to. And then so how do you get good again? Like how do you get that
It
pick?
does. And the other thing I just thought of is, at least right now, you're kind of properly weighting an entire schedule, but some teams have more backloaded schedules versus front-loaded
Th-
schedules, and so
yeah.
that I didn't think about. I still think that
Well,
this would be way more from an on-court product perspective. If you were looking to make basketball relevant for, or the regular season more relevant than it is now, I do think this would solve that, because how many teams are really, we might get a Sam Hinkie sicko that
mhm.
says, 0 and 51, and then our season begins at game 52.
Right.
But how
Right.
often is that really going to happen?
Yeah, I do think anything you raised, I forgot about this. Like the unbalanced strength of schedule stuff is an issue with any version of there's a cutoff where wins and losses like count for something different in
Yep.
the season. Like like from a fairness perspective, like that's got some thorns there. Yeah, I don't that's interesting. I can imagine the really bad teams that are sort of like organically bad saying this is unfair because you're telling us to lose for 65-70% of the season because that's good for us. And then to try to win late, like there's no way certain teams will ever be able. I could see that being the argument against it, but counter, nobody cares about the NBA until later in the season anyway. So if you're just going to
Right.
have people checked out during the NFL season for that early like loss incentivized part, I don't know. If you get more viewership in March and April, that's good, right? Like you don't have competition then.
I think I like this better than just locking in the lottery odds March 1st, though.
Yes,
It's my own
I agree.
idea. We're kind of
Yeah.
a hybrid of a bunch of different ones, so that's not surprising. Can we talk about, let's talk about one that you introduced to me.
Yeah, it's 30% baked, I'd say, not quite half baked. Um so I would this includes pick protections. I like the limiting it to four, top 14. That's part of it. Um I would unweight the lottery because all here the goal here is I want every
Getting the
single
Mavericks
team.
Cooper flag again? Is that what the
Yeah.
goal here?
Well, not I want the Warriors somehow to finish 8th in the conference and get the number 1 pick. I would unweight the lottery and I would expand the number of teams in it. Um, I'm sure there are drawbacks. I pray that you'll point them out. And so what you end up with is to be specific, 18 teams are in the lottery. Everybody that is not a top 6 seed in their conference. So theoretically what you get is not just teams having to choose between like I'm moving the cutoff up of like when it makes sense to tank. So like if you're the 7, 8, 9, 10 teams, you're the play-in teams, the teams that make it in to the 7 or 8 spots are still in the lottery. So like not only do you have teams wanting to be in the play-in, you still have teams wanting to win the play-in, you still have teams like totally incentivized to just win as much as they can. Cause like the argument is like, who wants to be the 8th seed really? Like, what are you getting out of that? You're going to get smoked by the number 1 seed. Well, that's better than not being, you're still in the lottery. Like you're a playoff team and yet you're in the lottery. So I'm just like bumping the decision point up like a couple slots.
Mhm.
Because I feel like there's no top 6 team, I don't think, that's like, you know what? I think I'd rather drop to 7 or 8 and have to go through the play-in and have to face a 1 or 2 seed because I get a lottery pick, as opposed to like, no, we'll stick at 6. Like if it's Denver,
Well,
like not well, Denver's a bad example because they could win from 7 or 8. But does that make
well,
sense? Like I just want to avoid good teams deciding it makes sense for us to not keep going for it.
but does flattening the lottery because couldn't you, in theory, and this probably wouldn't be done from a, it's not going to be a coaching or a player thing, let's use Sam Presti as an example.
Mhm.
Deciding my team is so stacked right now, but we need more cost controlled talent. Like we're just gonna come and we're gonna win it from the play-in.
I
Like
mean,
there would be an executive that would potentially decide I think that's kind of a small blip. So you're not going to have, how often would that happen, if ever? I'm mapping
oh,
out an extreme.
well, no, that's where it's like trying to decide where to, because you could do like only the top 4 seeds in each conference are out of the lottery. Everybody, so now we're up to 22 teams are in an unweighted lottery. Like then you might say like, well, what's the difference between 4 and 5? Like you might drop the 5 because you get in the lottery and then you have a road series in the first round. Who cares if you're the Thunder or whatever? You might make that trade off because you got a tiny now because it's unweighted, a tiny chance at the number 1 pick. I'm trying to find I think the 6 feels right to me, top 6 in each conference being out of the lottery. But you're right, like if the incentive to lose is still there, you might have this crazy,
Now,
you might have an irrational actor.
what do you mean by flat lottery odds for 18 teams, though? We're not talking about an equitable chance
No,
of winning it, are we?
I think I want it fully even. So if you're the Wizards and you have the fewest wins in the league, and you're the number 7 seed in the West, and that's like say uh Phoenix, and you've won 46 games, same lottery odds.
Why would you ever, do you have to get rid of why would you ever want to be in the play-in tournament at that point then?
Why would you
If
want to
it's,
be in the play-in
because
tournament?
if it's a chance, if you either have the same percentage chance of only of 18 other teams of getting the 1 in 18 shot of getting the number 1 pick, or you can win a play-in game or 2 and then just get trucked by the Oklahoma City Thunder in round 1 of the playoffs. I'm wondering how many teams would opt against that.
Well, wait. So what would so do you think then we should give, because the goal is, well, what types of tanking are we trying to address? I hate the middle tanking as opposed to the bottom of the standings tanking. So what if you made it so that you don't flatten the lottery odds, but what you do is give teams in the play-in like better lottery odds than the teams with the like 4 worst records? Does that address what you're talking about? So you're
We
gunning for
bet.
that plan.
Oh, jeez. Maybe you could do something where if you make it so it's your seeds 7, 8, 9, 10, and then the lottery odds for that, you get better if you make it out of the play-in tournament. Right,
Okay,
because if
yeah.
you're giving it better than the bottom 4 teams, I think that would eliminate the middle part. Because if you're
Well,
right,
I mean, the
it would.
effect would not be that different than the counting wins towards your lottery odds after the trade deadline, because it's like the same arguments the really bad teams would make against that apply here, where it's like we can't compete. So you're building, I feel like it's a political campaign. It's like we're trying to build out the middle class, Dan. We're really trying to make it so there's a reason to want to be there.
Well,
Does
but
that
no,
feel
but
like
at
what
the
that
same
is?
time, I think if you're not putting those odds above the bottom 4 teams, which at this point, let's look at the West as an example. So as of right now, the Kings and the Pelicans, like, do you separate it by? That's not fair because of the conference imbalance. But so right now, the Wizards, Pacers, it works out that it's 2 per conference. Wizards, Pacers, Kings, Pelicans. Bottom 4 teams would have the ball. Apologies, Pelicans, but what that does to the lottery odds. If you're the Mavericks, the Jazz, or the Clippers that are kind of in that no man's land right now.
Mhm.
You're all of a sudden like going to go. I think by doing what you've outlined, you've kind of just eliminated basically. There'll be 2 teams, maybe 3 teams per conference that might decide the second half of the year we're not gonna chase the play-in. But I think honestly, you're probably looking at. I I don't. I like that idea. I think the bottom 4 teams still need slightly better odds. But if
Yeah.
you're saying you make it into the play-in and your odds get better if you're in the play-in, because you're only talking about like what's the discrepancy right now between who's out of the play-in? The Clippers, the Jazz, and the Mavericks versus the Blazers and the Grizzlies. It's not huge. I mean, we're talking about a
Mhm.
matter of a couple losses there for the most
Yeah.
part.
I do think the more we talk this out, the more of this, my idea is effectively accomplishing very similar things to what yours is, where it's just like we're trying to get teams that have some shot at it to try to win a lot towards the end of the year, at least,
Mine
right?
ends
Like
up penalizing actually your original idea penalized bottom four teams more. I think when you said give them the play-in teams better odds than
I
the
do I
bottom
do
four.
think, isn't there some element of this where it's like, if the cost of 26 teams competing hard is 4 just sort of don't have a chance, like, I'm kinda willing to pay it. Is you know what I mean? Like,
Here,
we're taking away the chance of an honorable rebuild being effective, like, by doing this. But I
you
think,
are
like,
you are correct though, because it's even if what I just said, as long as you have the incentive, so you're better off finishing with the 28th worst record than 24th. Teams are going to steer to, if you don't think that you can get up into playing territory, you are still going to
mhm,
steer towards the bottom. I guess I just land at you're never going to eradicate tanking in full unless
mhm.
you do something. Well, this would be,
Well,
let's go to this idea: abolish the draft altogether.
yeah.
I know some people are in favor of it. I'm I tend to be pro labor, but you need to give this just kills smaller market teams. And I don't know what you could do to where even if it was every 5 years you're allotted a certain amount of money you could spend on draft picks. I
Yeah.
just this really threatens like what? A half of the 2/3 of the NBA it feels like.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend of the pod, Bill, about this because he follows international soccer much more closely than I do, and I was just like, "Tell me about relegation, right?" And like, because why, never going to happen in the NBA. It's crazy. It's like so punitive, right? Like, if you are at the bottom of the table of, like, say, the Premier League, and so you're relegated the following year, you lose a bunch of money from, like, broadcast rights because you're not in the Premier League anymore. So there's this giant step
Oh,
down. Like, players have stuff in their contracts, like, built in
I
to
didn't
where
even
if you
think about that.
it's brutal, right? So if you fall out, you just like the incentive to not get relegated is like off the charts. Like, you must win every game you possibly can because, like, the punishment is so crazy, right? And I was like, this would never happen in the NBA, but that's awesome. Like, it accomplishes what we're going for. Like, you try to win all the time, no matter what. And I was like, why can't this happen? And what he was pointing out is that, like, the setup of international soccer is Wild West. There's no salary cap, there's no luxury tax, it's pure capitalism. There's no draft. So that's what brought me to this, is like, so what's your setup look like? Because in soccer, it's like you sign a 14-year-old into your developmental academy and you bring him along until he's ready to play for the big club. Like, is that what we want in the NBA? Do we want, like, the Los Angeles Lakers prep academy where there's a bunch of kids that are
Yeah.
just out of middle school that are now in your program that you're developing, that you're paying already? Like, that feels weird.
Yeah, it
But, like,
does.
if you're gonna abolish the draft, like, you just inevitably get into a setup like that, because how are you getting players? Like, you're acquiring them, signing them, and then paying them money and hoping they become good. Like, that's what it is. And so then it's just the haves have what they have, and the have nots never get there, right? Like, because of market size. So the abolishing the draft comes with, like, so many tricky, like,
I-
the league is
I've ac-
so different with no draft, is what I'm saying, I
I've a-
guess.
I've actually spent time thinking about what is the way you could abolish the draft but still not completely nuke the competitive landscape. And
Mhm.
I haven't come up with anything. Not that I'm some genius that like give me enough time and I'll hack this.
I'll solve
But
it.
yeah, but I just think that that would be catastrophic for the league has spent so much time trying. And by the way, they're not talking about this, but a lot of people bring it up and they say, "What? This is stupid that players are assigned where they go." I, if this was real life, like sports is meaningful, it keeps us employed. Like this isn't. This is a game, and these
Mhm.
guys are getting played so much. It's an entertainment product, and
Yep.
I don't like they. If you want to talk about getting rid of restricted free agency after that first contract, those first 4 or 5 years, that might be a different discussion, but abolishing the draft, I think, just puts too many. And then at the end of the day, it's not just about, well, do you really only care? It's not about the bottom line for the owners. It's you need to give fan base a reason to think that they have a chance. And that's what the draft, by the way, especially now, because free agency just doesn't exist anymore, basically.
No, you're selling wins or you're selling hope. And if you don't have a draft, I don't know how you're selling hope to the worst teams like that. You have to be that much better at everything related to team building. And it's just like those markets are not equipped to just win with a hand tied behind their back if you're not going to be able to draft the guy that changes your franchise. It's tough. Like I get it. Like on some level, it's like it is objectively weird and sort of unfair that like you're one of the best in the world at what you do and you have no control over where you get to like ply that trade. Like that's weird. But again, I agree with you.
I mean, the NBA is basically a version of socialism when you think about it, because of the way that revenue sharing,
socialist principle for sure. Yeah.
Right. The revenue sharing, the way that that works, and even there's a max salary. And so if you're going to abolish the draft, you also abolish the max salary. So it's, hey, you can pick where you want to play when you're young, but like you're going to be maxed out at what you can make when you're at the best point of your career. It's just, so I think there would be too many moving parts behind it. What it would do maybe, or increase the value of, is scouting departments probably become just like the most sought after positions to be filled, because go out and find Jokic, like the guy who would have been drafted during a Quesarito commercial.
And it would also professionalize much lower levels of the sport, which is already a problem. Like basically high school basketball is professionalized now, but it would, if you were if you can't draft the guy, then you better find him first. And that's going to be middle school or like something crazy like that. Right. Where, I guess you would still have a cap on like, maybe you just put the age, you got to be whatever it is now. I can't even remember, like a year out of your high school class.
And do you think that would do, but maybe it wouldn't have an impact at all, but right now when people talk about players sitting out of games in college, just like, does it make it more like that you would get more of those cases if they have to go to college or go somewhere else, or would it not impact it? Just because I guess if the idea is it professionalizes the sport even more at lower levels, you might be coming out of your sophomore in high school. You know where you're going to sign after your freshman year in college. Maybe
right. So why not just, this is the thing, like it would take so many additional steps. Like why not just have youth academies where like you're in the Lakers program because they signed you when you were a teenager, like that kind of thing. Cause why you're going to go play for this other, like sort of professional, but like we've all agreed it's at a lower level, talking about college basketball. Now you're going to go play for this other professional organization for a while, like, and not be in I don't know. There's probably more to talk about than any other fix here with abolishing the draft, but it's just like, it's all big picture. Like the sport would have to look totally different, I think, for this to even be started.
I have one more that's being bandied about, and I don't know if you have any more after that, but conduct a lottery for every pick in the lottery. So right now it determines the top 4 picks, and so now it would determine all 14. And so you keep the odds the same, but there's like right now you have a floor of how far you can fall if you have the worst record.
I see.
But now there would basically be no floor.
So that's interesting. So then no longer if you have one of the 4 worst records, are you guaranteed to be in the top 8? You still have, so this would hurt the bottom of the league right? Cause you can fall farther, and does it help the mid tier or does it not? I guess, I don't know.
I think it helps. I almost feel like
the upside and downside here.
So this is not my idea. I think it was, who did I hear talk about it? It was Tim McMahon, I want to say.
Okay.
I think it might incentivize more of what we saw from the Mavericks in 2022, 21.
Okay.
What year was that?
Year, yeah.
Because it's, you have, I only have an X% chance of 1.8% chance of getting the number 1 pick, but now if it's being picked for every, like I think it definitely hurts the bottom feeders for sure. But I don't know if it does enough to prevent tanking. And then if anything, I think there's a chance it might increase it, unless I'm understanding how that would work. Because if you're a team that's could be in the play-in, let's use this season as an example. When the Oklahoma City Thunder exist, I don't care how you feel about the Phoenix Suns, the Warriors, the Grizzlies, the Blazers, the Clippers. None of those teams are beating the Thunder. Right. And so if you're faced with the prospect of, I can go into the play-in and face the Thunder if I win get trucked, or I could just have this chance, like a 14 different drawings of getting
Mhm.
into, I mean, it's not the number 1 pick, but it's the number 5 pick.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see more teams kind of pivot out of play-in territory if that
Yeah,
happens.
that's not what you want. That's not what you want. You want more teams in that range to be trying to win as much as possible. Because again, like the difference between like a 42 win team and a 50 win team on a lot of nights is just like who's playing. And if you're just going to shut, they could be on equal footing. You want those teams to both be incentivized to like play everybody and give max effort. So yeah, I don't know about that one. So we solved it, I think, right? Is that what
Well,
we did?
so the other one, I think we did kind of talk about this. I've seen some people mention too, like, why not just hold the tournament, like like a lottery tournament for teams competing for and the winner gets like, that's how you order the picks. You mentioned it before, though. Then you enter the territory of you have guys who are supposed to compete for their, so you would
Mhm.
have to make the financial incentive.
Big time.
So it's not happening in season. It's this postseason tournament. I don't know
Mhm.
what the financial incentive would need to be for players to get on board, for active players to get on board with that.
Yeah, it would. I can't. It's hard to know. Way more than the in season tournament, I would think. Because it's like, especially if it's like an end of season thing, it's just like we're tired, man. We just went through a lot of these teams have just endured like a bunch of
We're
losses. You want
tired.
us to come out and get like, oh yeah, let's flip the switch now. It's April. We've all played 3,000 minutes. Like, forget it. That'd be tough.
Do you have any other? Have you seen any other? I don't even. I remember reading up on it a couple years ago, and I already forgot the principles of the wheel.
The
Like,
wheel is too complicated for I'm not smart enough. I'm sure it's not complicated, but it was just like I think because when we talk, I think like so you're gonna time your like peaks and valleys organizationally in line with like when you're in the running for the top several pick. Like I don't think that's
and the thing I struggle with too is just even just looking at the current. If you were to do anything to limit the number of times a team can be in the top 4, what if there is just some catastrophic injury that is not ruining just that
sure.
season, but now you've
Yeah.
lost your franchise cornerstone? Is that they just come back and they're never the same? That just, it makes me feel icky, I think, is the
Yeah.
scientific word for it.
Yeah. I guess
What
like I was just gonna ask you like who do you think at the moment the system we have in place is not serving? Like who the way it is right now,
the
because
sports betting
we're trying to
industry.
solve the maybe
I'm
that's
I'm dead ass serious because this whole injury report stuff, this is
sure.
all about, to me, I think it's more about sports betting than I think the league right now has had 7 consecutive different champions. The parity is there. And how many teams you could look at the, I'm not talking to you specifically. You could look at the records and tell me who sucks. You're absolutely right. How many teams are tanking right now?
I mean, is it well like well even Washington we keep going back to like yeah, but they're
They're
not
playing, but
they're just
they
organically bad. Brooklyn's
they might
organically
be the
bad.
only team. They might
Yeah.
be the only team. You could say them, and if you want to say Brooklyn because of the way they built out their team
Mhm.
for this
Mhm.
season, that's 2 out of
Yeah.
30. The
I
Kings thought this is, again, this is why the Kings, it's more the Kings thought they were going to be good. Even the Pelicans, Derek Queen is going to be really good, but like they totally miscalculated their position. And so
yeah.
but even they've played better under James Borrego. You
Mhm.
look at the standings, there are 2 teams, I think, max right now. I think what the issue you're trying to solve is that number is going to go up after the trade
Well,
deadline.
and it's
And
gonna
that's
go
the
up
issue you're trying to solve.
we started this by pointing out the examples of like the mid-tier tanking and how rare they were, right? And it's just kind of like that that's what you're working to solve. Like Utah is this season is the example of like, okay, there's a little we can see how this might go, right? And it's maybe it's different because the Jazz said they weren't going to do this, but like you're just worried about a couple teams, maybe it's more than that, in the middle that steer into the skid. And like ultimately we landed on this early, like that just doesn't happen often enough to like let's revamp the whole process. I don't know. I don't like
I
that stuff, but I don't know if we like are you looking for solutions to a problem that is not nearly as big as it seems? Maybe
I,
is the
I
like
actually I think if we operate under the guise that this is all about competitive integrity, yes.
mhm,
But I think that the NBA, a big part of this is that sports betting. and the money that they're going to stand to make off it, the interest that it drives, it gets a lot harder to maintain that. If that's why all this injury report stuff exists. And look, I'm ultimately fine at the end of the day with anything that improves the quality of basketball wire to wire. You could sign me up for it, but I just don't. I don't. It's like you said. I don't know if this is a big enough issue. I would love to see some of these solutions in that, like the limited pick protections. I like the way we kind of half baked like your idea out with the flattened lottery odds or getting into the play-in and winning. Like if you win it, you have better lottery odds. I wouldn't mind seeing the losses pre-trade deadline win because I think that would just flip the way that teams operate on its head. Could they try something like? And you don't know who's going to actively end up here. So that would also increase the intrigue. But do you just sort it by who is the best point differential or record against top 10 teams at the end of the season? Like of the non-playoff teams.
I thought you were going to say, so before the season starts, your team is assigned a random lottery pick and you don't know what it is until draft night. And or something like that, and you just play the whole year. You don't know if you're incentivized to win or to lose. The lottery order is set. It's got nothing to do with how you perform. I don't know. It'd be pretty exciting on TV.
What would trades look like at that point?
Oh, wouldn't that be exciting? Like we're gonna swap first round picks. Don't know what it is. Let's just gamble. That'd be great.
But I do. It does feel like, though, if we're operating saying this is about the competitive integrity of the game, it feels more about the midseason tanking than the full season tanking now, right? It feels like this system has at least weeded out serial entire season tanking.
Yeah. I think we're pretty close to like optimizing given the circumstances, like given the setup of the league, given how
they won't shorten the schedule.
Yeah. Like all that's, I just think like there are more drastic solutions, but like, and I think it's close to as good as it can be. I still think there's a tweak or two, some version of like pull like elements from what we've gone through here. There's a better version, but like the play-in, the flattened odds from a few years ago, like all that has been like pretty effective, I think. So I feel like the league is close, but it's definitely not perfect.
Another potential solution, I'm surprised I didn't think of this. What if you did something to increase the variability in the first round of the playoffs? Like if you brought it back to best of 5, and so now you are more incentivized to get into the play-in, or if you just went nuclear and said, this is best of 3 now, people.
So does that, though, devalue the regular season? Because, like...
Couldn't you argue the play-in already threatens to do that?
Yeah, well, okay, so what does that achieve? What are we accomplishing?
So the thinking is if you have because part of right now is if you were pivoting out of the play-in, it's, well, I'm not going to beat the Thunder if I make it out, or I'm not going to beat the Rockets or whatever 4 times in 7 tries as the 7 or the 8 seed.
Yeah.
If you have to beat them 2 times in 3 tries,
sure.
Isn't that a little bit different? Yeah.
No, yeah, that's true. That you shrink the sample, like anomalies are more likely. I could see that. And so then you're not steering out of the play-in or one of the 7 or 8 spots because, like, I don't know, we can't beat them 4 out of 7, but we could beat them 3 out of 5 or whatever.
Right.
That's interesting. I think maybe you'd have to add rounds to the playoffs because teams would be pissed that you're costing them playoffs.
Why don't we just have a 30-team playoff? Do you remember in youth sports where it's every team makes the playoff single elimination?
I mean, the NCAA tournament's still pretty popular, Dan. We could just throw them all in there, single elimination.
So
see what
the
happens.
NBA needs to expand to 64? You want to do 128 teams?
32. You could do it with 32. You just need 2 more. Vegas, Seattle. Tournament.
How do the playoffs end up lasting 3-4 months though? That's
there's the issue. And like the gate, like you're costing teams multiple games. Yeah. But can you imagine the spectacle like of the 1 versus 16? Talk about small sample anomalies. Like
because I do love the play-in element though. Yeah. Like the play-in has been an unequivocal success. Like that 100%. Has been like, it has just been absolutely awesome. Yeah. And it's now you would be getting into the realm of, well, how do you incentivize making the play-in, because then that should in theory curtail tanking, because you could try and engineer it from there and say maybe this isn't about lottery odds, it's about increasing the opportunities to win if you do make the play-in. But to your point, you're going to get pushback. I would be curious though, how many teams in the league could you say right now would absolutely vote against shifting the first round to best of 3 or best of 5?
How many teams in the league? Well, I would flip it and say not enough owners. The 23 owners would not vote for it. I feel
You
pretty
know that the
confident there.
Bulls are going to be all over that, or unless they don't want to play that long.
I
then
mean,
it's-
like selfishly, I believe the Warriors have a great shot in a single game against a lot of teams. They're just not going to win a long series against anybody. So let's do it. Sounds great.
Do you have anything else on this?
No,
Look, I agree that the midseason tankings are. We're not. I'm trying to come across as a tanking sympathizer. Some of the more radical ideas, like that, the one that I hate the most, that seems realistic. The abolish the draft is just not happening. The one I hate the most is very clearly you can't have a top 4 pick in consecutive years. I think the consequences would be disastrous.
And it doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't. I mean, yeah. We've agreed that like the worst tanking is not the Sixers process tanking. Like nobody's doing that. Then that's what that would address. And so we got a solution in search of a problem in that case.
Do you have anything else, or are you ready to take us out of here?
I think an hour on tanking is probably enough. Plus, we solved it at like minute 28, as I said, so we're good. Thanks everybody for listening, for watching, rate, review, and subscribe. Join our Discord. Links for that in the YouTube and podcast description. Leave us a comment here. I hesitate to say we did not canvas every solution, so please let us know in the YouTube comments wherever you're consuming this. Let us know what your is, how big an issue is tanking. How do you fix it?
What if players, Nikola Jokic has to play with a different team every other year? Like it's you pick every player who makes an All-Star game can only stay with the same team for a maximum of 2 consecutive seasons. That's how we spread the talent.
We're not topping that.
And you can't double back. You can't double back. You've played for the Nuggets, then you go play for the Lakers, but then you have to go. Yeah, that's.
I look forward to Jokic on the Warriors. That'll be fun.
Over the course of his 16-year career. That's 8 teams. Get the Jokic experience.
Yeah, I mean, look, we want parity. There you go.
Done.
Jokic has to move. This is okay. Shouts Frank Ntilikina. Apologies, Jared Allen.